Hello dear viewers who are watching the channel. Today, we will embark on a majestic journey in the middle of the vast ocean, where the waves are constantly roaring and the sun rises from the deep blue horizon. This is where resilient, strong and persistent people, Japanese fishermen, are working day and night on modern ships, using giant nets to catch hundreds of tons of fish each trip. A seemingly simple job, but it contains many challenges, dangers and pride in the long-standing fishing tradition of the land of the rising sun. Let's follow them, from the moment the ship leaves the dock, through the storm, until each fresh batch of fish is pulled onto the deck and brought back to the mainland. We will explore the entire process of catching, processing, preserving and the arduous journey to bring rich seafood from the ocean to the dining tables of millions of consumers around the world. A true, vivid and emotional story awaits you ahead. Amidst the dense fog of the early morning, a fishing port in the northern coastal region of Japan begins to bustle. The ship's whistle echoes across the water, mixed with the murmur of the waves and the hurried footsteps of fishermen preparing to set sail. On deck, fuel tanks have been filled, electronic systems and navigation radars have been thoroughly checked, cables, large nets, tractors, all are ready for a long voyage of hundreds of nautical miles out to sea. This is not just a simple fishing trip, but a battle for survival between humans and nature, between the tenacious will of the fishermen and the harshness of the sea. As the clock strikes 5 a.m., the ship begins to leave the dock, quietly gliding through the cold water. The wind from the open sea began to blow strongly. Each wave crashed against the side of the ship, creating a strong rhythm like the opening drumbeat of an epic sea song. The fishermen wore waterproof jackets, gloves, and serious eyes. Everyone knew that the work ahead would not be easy, but in their hearts was a strong belief in the profession. In the sea, in the big catch waiting on the distant horizon. After nearly a day of traveling, the large ship reached the licensed fishing area, where schools of fish were moving with the ocean currents. The sonar system at the bottom of the ship began to operate continuously, sending vivid images of the fish's movements to the screen in the cabin. The captain, with decades of experience fighting at sea, carefully monitored each parameter, making decisions on the time and place to drop the net. When everything was ready, the decisive command rang out, "Drop the net." Immediately, the entire deck woke up. The engines roared, and giant nets weighing tons began to be lowered into the sea. The nets were specially designed, hundreds of meters long, as wide as a soft wall under the ocean. Able to surround a large area of water to effectively collect schools of fish. Under the water, thousands of fish began to be swept into the net like a whirlwind. There were herring, mackerel, scad, and sometimes even large squid or tuna wandering with schools of small fish. While waiting for the net to be filled with fish, the sailors took the opportunity to check the equipment, prepare the hoisting ropes and cranes to prepare to collect the nets. The wind began to get stronger, large waves crashed into the hull, and cold seawater splashed onto the deck. But no one faltered. Everyone understood. This was the time to concentrate, because a full net would bring hundreds of tons of fish, the result of a long day of hard work. And then, the second command rang out, "Collect the nets." Dozens of hands immediately got into position, and machines began to pull the heavy nets onto the deck. The cables screeched, and each section of the net slowly rose from the seabed. And then a magnificent sight appeared, thousands of silver fish, sparkling in the sunlight, thrashing around in the net like a living stream. There were so many fish that they collided with each other, splashing all over the deck, creating a chaotic scene that only those who had worked in the profession could see with their own eyes. When the entire bottom of the net was lifted, an automatic opening mechanism released all the fish into large holds on the ship. The fresh fish, still flapping their tails, were quickly sorted. A group of people were tasked with taking the large fish to the preliminary cleaning area, while the small fish were frozen on the spot. The ship was equipped with a high-capacity refrigeration system, which could keep hundreds of tons of fresh fish until they reached port. Such a successful catch is the result of hours of tireless work. But the Japanese fishermen do not stop there. When the sun is still high in the sky and the sea is still calm, they continue to cast their nets, looking for new schools of fish. Some days, the boat will make 3 to 5 catches, each time bringing in dozens of tons of fish, contributing to a total yield of hundreds of tons after each trip. From 5 to 7 days. On the vast ocean, there is no place to take shelter, no support except the ship itself and the strong team spirit among the sailors. Japanese fishermen, whether they are the ones operating the machines or the ones directly operating the nets, understand the importance of every action, every minute on the ship. Everything operates like a precise machine, nothing more, nothing less. Every breath seems to blend with the sound of the engine, the sound of the waves, and the sound of the fish flapping their tails when being brought up from the water. Inside the ship's hold, the cold air is all around. The modern refrigeration system operates day and night. Keeping the temperature stable below 0 degrees Celsius. The fish trays are neatly stacked, clearly classified by type. Tuna is kept separately. Herring, mackerel, sardines are brought to the preliminary processing area. At the processing area, the sailors use specialized knives to cut off the gills, scales and intestines of the fish, then wash them with filtered seawater. Everything must be done quickly, accurately and in absolute hygiene, because this is not only food. But also the honor of a group of hard-working workers in the middle of the ocean. Outside, clouds have gathered, signaling a storm that could strike at any moment. The captain continuously updates weather data from satellites and radar on board. If the wind is too strong or the waves exceed the safety threshold, fishing activities will be immediately suspended, and the entire ship will switch to anchoring or storm avoidance mode. However, if it is only light rain and light wind, the veteran fishermen continue their work. As if nothing can stop them. Every time the net is pulled up, the fishermen's hearts beat faster. No one knows the exact number of fish inside until they see it with their own eyes and hear it. Some days, the nets were almost empty, just a few dozen kilos of stray fish, and everyone's eyes were downcast. And silence fell over the deck. But some days, when the sonar signaled a dense school of fish, The nets were pulled up so heavily that the deck was barely able to hold them. And the whole ship exploded in indescribable joy. When night fell, the sea became pitch black, with only the light from the high-pressure lamps illuminating the deck like a stage in the middle of the ocean. The men continued to work under the pale white light, their shadows falling long on the deck soaked with water and fish scales. The smell of fish, the smell of salt, and the sound of machinery blended together into a wordless symphony, both tiring and full of life. In the small break room, a few sailors took turns eating a quick dinner of white rice, canned fish, and seaweed soup. They laughed, talked, told old stories, family stories, and then returned to their workstations. On board, no one is allowed to be careless. Because the sea never sleeps, and opportunities do not wait. In the control cabin, the captain is in constant contact with other fishing vessels in the fleet to share information about fish flows, currents, and warnings of danger. In Japan's offshore fishing industry, cooperation between vessels is key. Each trip is not only about the catch of fish, but also a symbol of solidarity between people working in the same profession. There are days when the weather is so harsh that fishing has to stop completely. The ships are forced to anchor in the middle of the sea, enduring waves 5 to 7 meters high, and winds gusting 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. In those moments, the fishermen's hearts are filled with anxiety, worry about the ship, worry about the net, worry about whether this trip will yield enough catch. But after all, they still stick with it, still believing that the storm will pass. The sky will brighten, and the fish will return. When the weather stabilized, the whole boat seemed to come back to life. Everyone quickly checked the equipment, reconnected the broken net, restarted the sonar system, and got ready for another round of fishing. The waves no longer seemed so scary, because people's hearts had long since become stronger than them. For Japanese fishermen, the sea is not just a place to work, it is a part of their flesh and blood. A place where they entrust their youth, faith, and hope for a prosperous tomorrow for their families. As each day passed, the boat became more and more full of fish. The holds gradually filled up. The refrigerators worked at full capacity. The captain began to calculate the return time, based on the amount of fish caught, the weather conditions, and the time for safe storage. When the yield reached the required level, usually around 150 to 200 tons of fish, the boat would turn back to the dock. Carrying with it the fruits of sweat, tears, and perseverance in the open sea. A new day dawned on the vast ocean. The pale sunlight gradually cleared away the lingering night mist on the deck. On the large fishing boat, the Japanese fishermen were busy with their daily work, even though they only slept for a few hours in the cold and cramped cabins. No one complained, no one was lazy, because they know, every moment at sea is a precious opportunity. Every honest penny brought back to feed their families back home. After a quick breakfast of rice balls, boiled eggs and some hot tea, the whole crew plunged back into the grind of work. The waves were calmer today, The sky was clear and blue, a sign of good fishing. The nets continued to be lowered, and the sonar radars worked at full capacity. The ship moved quietly in a zigzag pattern, surrounding large schools of fish swimming at depths of about 40 to 80 meters below the surface. With a modern positioning system and the captain's many years of experience, the first catch of the day was a great success. Dozens of tons of bright silver mackerel, plump sardines and a few large tuna were neatly contained in the hold. Cheers of joy rang out. Smiles were evident on the tanned faces, covered in the salty smell of fish but as bright as the sun in the middle of the ocean. But catching is only part of the journey. Another equally important part is preserving and processing the product right on the boat. The fish that have just been pulled up cannot be left in the air for long, because after just a few hours they will lose quality. Therefore, on the boat there is always a team specializing in the preliminary processing, freezing and packaging. The machines are arranged neatly and kept clean. The fish are manually classified by experienced fishermen. Large fish will be filleted on the spot. Small fish will be washed with cold seawater and then put into the quick freezing system. In every smallest operation, from washing the fish, cutting the gills, packing the tray, vacuuming, the discipline and perfectionism typical of the Japanese are clearly demonstrated. Despite being at sea, they still maintain strict hygiene and quality control procedures no different from a food factory on land. Each packaged product is clearly labeled, with a batch number, catch time, and geographic location, all to ensure traceability and absolute reliability for consumers. As noon approaches, the wind begins to pick up from the southeast. The waves show signs of increasing, but that does not stop the nets from continuing to be lowered. Another batch, then another. The nets are lowered and pulled up in a regular rhythm. With each pull-up, hundreds of fish are pulled out of the ocean, sparkling silver in the sunlight, creating a picture that is both overwhelming and sacred. On deck, the men are still working hard amid the roaring of the engines. The whistling of the wind, and the cheerful calls between the work teams. Some people stood firmly on the slippery deck, pulling each heavy piece of net in their hands. Some people carefully placed each tray of fish into the cold room. Some people wiped their sweat, then continued to hold the knife to cut the fish. The whole ship was a unified entity, a collective without complaints, without lamentation, only perseverance, diligence and deep love for the job. In the engine room, engineers continuously checked the pressure, temperature and operating capacity of the preservation systems. No problems were allowed while the ship was still at sea, because even a small technical error could affect the quality of hundreds of tons of fish and the efforts of dozens of people. Therefore, the role of the technicians on the ship was always placed on par with the sailors.